is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast, the podcast where we talk everything National Football League in season, off season. It does not matter because it is football, and welcome to this Week 17 recap of the 2023 National Football League season as we turn the page into the brand new year of 2024. In the calendar year, that is, we are heading into the final week of the regular season, which means we are just 1 week away from Super Wildcard Weekend kicking off for the NFL playoffs. But as always, before we get into it, I'd like to ask, if you have not done so already, to please like, subscribe, and share the video if you're not done so already and you would like to, or know anybody that enjoys this kind of content. Helps boost the exposure of the channel, helps get us out to more eyeballs. So you have not done that and you would like to, that would mean the absolute world to me. Also, if you want to, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports to help support this channel financially. That link to that will be in the description down below. But let's get on with the show. Now, second to last week of the NFL regular season, not a lot to talk about from a pure game perspective for the most part. Most of this is just storyline stuff, whether it's going into the last week or things to focus on going into the off season for a lot of these teams, as this upcoming week is going to be the last time these teams play football again until August, until next preseason. So there's quite a bit to talk about from that regard. But first, unfortunately, we got to start with the elephant in the room. We have to address how Week 17 basically kicked off. And that is with a great game that happened on Saturday night that was basically given the Monday Night Football treatment, as there was no Monday Night Football game. That broadcast for ESPN was moved to Saturday for this weekend, and I believe the same thing will happen this upcoming week for Texans-Colts, if I'm not mistaken. But coming out of that game, which was a matchup between the Detroit Lions and the Dallas Cowboys, a matchup of then two 11-4 teams, vying for playoff position. In the case of the Dallas Cowboys, trying to cement their place on top of the NFC East, and the Lions, who were still in contention for at least the number 2 seed. So it was a big game. It was a playoff-like atmosphere, and it was a really good game that went down to the wire. And instead, in a matter of, we should have been coming out of that game talking about how good of a game it was, how competitive the Detroit Lions looked, how there might be some questions in regards to Mike McCarthy's play calling down the stretch once we reach playoff time, because he made some decisions when the last time the Cowboys had the ball that was, to say that they are head-scratching decisions would be an understatement. But instead, we are here, once again, story of the season, talking about NFL officiating being a serious problem. And out of all of the issues that have popped up throughout this season in regards to bad officiating and terrible calls or terrible missed calls, what happened on Saturday, without a shadow of a doubt, is the worst of them all. Because the Detroit Lions, again, being gifted a blessing because of the incompetency of one Mike McCarthy, who decided to, after getting the ball back on offense, right after a Jared Goff pick with under 2.5 minutes to go, decides to throw the ball 3 straight times, thus giving the Detroit Lions a minute and 42 seconds or something like that to march down the field to try and get a touchdown to tie the game and or a 2-point conversion to win the game. And yet, it played out exactly like that. The Lions went down the field, scored the touchdown, and now it was a matter of, all right, we knew they were going for 2. This is a Dan Campbell coach team. You know for a fact that he went to his offense before that drive and said, we're going down and we're scoring a touchdown. We're going for 2 to win this game. Fuck overtime. Fuck all that. We're winning the game now. And they did. And they pulled off an incredible play, an incredibly well-executed play with a tackle-eligible Taylor Decker coming out, going out to the corner of the end zone, and Jared Goff finding him. Decker was able to haul it in. All of a sudden, the Lions are up 1. It is an incredible play, and it was the biggest of Dan Campbell saying, I have big balls. We are making a statement and winning this game. And then flags come flying for illegal touching, ineligible man downfield on the offense, called on Taylor Decker, number 68. Crushing blow, crushing penalty. It pushed them back 5 yards, and the Lions still choose to go for 2 from the 7-yard line, which I was in shock by. I thought for sure that they would have just been like, okay, fine, we'll kick the extra point, we'll settle for overtime. Instead, they go for it. They're given another gift because Micah Parsons jumps off sides. So now they're back up to basically where they were before. And then Jared Goff misses a throw. Lions lose by 1. So the Lions had the victory in their hands, and it gets ripped away from them because Taylor Decker did not report as eligible to the referee. Except he did report as eligible. As you can see, and I'll put the image up on the screen here, that man right there talking to the referee in the white hat, Brad Allen, the head referee of the crew, is one Taylor Decker, a.k.a. the man who caught the 2-point conversion, a.k.a. the man that they called for an ineligible receiver for not calling on the play, for not calling or reporting as eligible on the play. But as you can see here, clearly he did, because they are not only within a yard of each other, but they're looking directly at each other. They are staring at each other. On what could have Taylor Decker been saying that wasn't, hey, I'm reporting as eligible? And then Brad Allen being questioned in the pool report after the game for this major fuck up. Because by this point, all of a sudden the images started swirling around Twitter and social media showing that no, Taylor Decker did go up to the referee and report as eligible. He did go up to Brad Allen and report himself as eligible, not number 70, who is, if you hear the audio on the broadcast, Brad Allen says number 70 is reported as eligible. Even though number 70 went on after the game, said, I didn't say a word to the referee. And Taylor Decker after the game said, I went up to him and I said, I'm reporting as eligible. So how could Brad Allen, especially when you look at it and it shows that Brad Allen is looking directly at Taylor Decker, how could he have messed that up? Well, he was asked in the pool report after the game and he said, well, I just assumed it was 70 because 70 was reporting all game, so I just assumed that it was him. I'm sorry, you assumed? You assumed? What do you mean you assumed? You're the head referee. You have the white hat on for a reason. You can't assume in that stage of a game, especially considering that Dan Campbell in the post-game press conference said, and this is his words, he explained everything to the refs to a T before the game, what that situation was going to do and what they were going to do if that situation were to arise. He said he explained everything to the referee, and the referee is looking at Taylor Decker, who is coming up to him saying, I'm reporting as eligible. So how could he have messed that up? How could you have possibly fucked things up like that to that extent? Shit like this gives ammo to people that think the NFL is rigged. We all sit here and say that's ridiculous. We talk to those conspiracy theorists and we're like, that's ridiculous. The league is not rigged. But then you see shit like that and you're like, can you blame them for thinking that? Because it's a horrible look. It is a horrible look. And then we start talking about, because think of all the horrible officiating calls, the most notable officiating calls that have happened throughout the season. The Chiefs-Packers game, where they called unnecessary roughness for a hit out of bounds on Patrick Mahomes, even though he was in bounds. And then later that drive in that game, a blatant pass interference called on MVS that just was not called at all. You know who the referee crew for that game was? That was Brad Allen's referee crew. Remember the Sunday Night Football game earlier in the year between the the Dolphins and the Eagles? You know, the game where the Dolphins got, like, what was it, like double-digit penalties, like 12 or 13 penalties, and while the Eagles didn't have a single penalty called on them the entire night? You know who the referee crew for that game was? Brad Allen's crew. All of a sudden, all of these big plays and all these horrible referee moments that we have pinpointed throughout the season, the ones that have caused the most outrage up to this point, most, if not all of them, have come from this one crew. And now the league, after the game, the league basically came out and said, yeah, they're not going to, Brad Allen's crew has been demoted from consideration to referee a playoff game, which honestly, that's the best thing they could have done, because this is a track record now throughout the year. Even though they're still going to be the referee crew for the Ravens-Steelers game, a game that has some playoff implications for the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're going to be the referee crew for that game on Saturday at 4:30. So that's nerve-wracking, if you're a Steelers fan at least, trying to get into the playoffs. So, but as far as the news of this team, or this crew rather, refereeing an NFL playoff game this year, that has been pretty much out of the picture. And if we find out later on that they will be, then that's just proof that the league doesn't want to discipline referees. That the referees have too much power when it comes to what the hell they want to do. And it's sad because it's been a constant thing throughout the years of the NFL has had a referee problem for so many years, and the league just doesn't want to change it. They don't want to do anything to fix it because they're scared that the referees union is going to sue them for something. So the referee union has the NFL at their will for the most part. But then when you hear things like last year during the Super Bowl press conference with Commissioner Roger Goodell, and he was asked about the referee issue, and he said, oh, refereeing has never been better. And you look at things that have happened throughout the season, even last year, it was like, you know that's not true. You know it's not true. So if he were to be asked about that, and he says the same thing this year, when that press conference does come, then at that point it's like, all right, this issue is never going to get fixed. It will never get fixed. And it's unfortunate because when you have it blatantly decide the outcome of games, it's disheartening as a fan because and coaches always say, don't let the game be decided by the referees. But sometimes it's situations that come where it's just like, it's hard for that not to happen sometimes. Especially in situations like this where you think the referee knows everything because he should know it, and then all of a sudden pretends like he doesn't. So, honestly, that's all I'm going to say on it, because everything else has been said about this, and there seems to have already been action taken as far as to the crew is concerned, and that's all I'm going to mention on that. Let's talk about another story that popped up, not so much this past week, but a story that kind of popped up the week before and has just kept gaining a lot of momentum and has gained a lot of discussion over these past couple of weeks. And that is the Broncos' decision to bench Russell Wilson for the remaining 2 games of the season. Obviously, he did not start this past weekend against the Chargers. Jarrett Stidham got the start. And honestly, I thought the story was going to stop there, but it's just gotten more and more weird because now there's conflicting sides as far as when the Broncos made this decision and when they informed Russ and his camp that was going to happen. So, for those of you who don't know, Russell Wilson got benched for the final 2 games of the season after the team's loss on Christmas Eve to the New England Patriots. After that, they announced that he got benched, and there was reports coming from within the team that they had made that decision around the bye week this year. Initially, it was a few weeks after the bye week. Actually, the first report was they made the decision to possibly do that after the loss to the Detroit Lions the week before. But then there was reports after saying that it was after the bye week. But then Russ's camp has come out recently saying that the Broncos told them that this was going to be the plan before training camp started. So, and then there was talks about like the Broncos maybe wanted to restructure his deal, and it's unclear whether Russ was willing to do that or not. And something just happened that led to whenever it happened, the Broncos ultimately decided that Russ was not going to be their quarterback going into 2024. And I think with them benching him these last 2 weeks, it's been a real confirmation that that's going to be the case. Because, I've heard a lot of people talking about, it'll be cheaper to just keep him rather than just let him walk. Because I think he'll be a $35 million cap hit if he's on the team for next year. But if they release him, they'll eat like about $80 million or so in dead money. So it's an expensive move. It is an expensive move nonetheless. And the thing is, that's not even including the contract that he signed when he got traded to Denver. Because when he got traded to Denver, he still had 2 years left on his active deal that he signed when he was still in Seattle. So technically, that new contract that he signed with that contract extension he signed with the Denver Broncos hasn't even really started yet. So, and even then, it's still going to be a massive cap hit for them. So, it's just a very weird story, and nobody knows whose decision it truly was, whether it was the front office, whether it was ownership that decided it, or whether it was all Sean Payton, or whether Sean Payton had a say in it at all. That seems to be the more popular theory going around, is that it was basically Sean Payton that was like, I don't want Russ as my quarterback anymore. And you kind of saw that brewing throughout the year. Even during the winning streak when they won like 5 or 6 games in a row, you always got that sense that Sean Payton looked at Russell Wilson and was like, this is not the guy I want running my offense. And because Sean Payton, most of his time as a head coach was with Drew Brees under center. So Drew Brees is a very specific kind of quarterback where it's, yeah, you could say you look at Drew Brees and Russ from a physical standpoint and say they are pretty much the same. But Drew Brees was very more of a precision passer. He was a timing guy in a Sean Payton's offense that relies on timing routes and relies on the quarterback being accurate and being on time and playing on structure effectively damn near 100% of the time. Drew Brees was the perfect guy to run Sean Payton's offense, and Russ is not like that at all. He's an improviser. He's a guy that scrambles around. He uses his athleticism to his advantage. Even during his prime years in Seattle, where he was considered a top 5 quarterback, he was never a guy that was really all that great playing in structure. So it was already kind of like a clunky marriage to begin with, even though there was reports saying that Russell Wilson really wanted to play with Sean Payton and felt like Sean Payton was the best coach for him. But I don't think Sean Payton felt that same way towards Russ. And it's been evident because Russ, yeah, he's played better than he did last year in Nathaniel Hackett's offense, which, to be honest, isn't really saying all that much. Because honestly, I'm still of the belief that any quarterback would have looked horrible in that situation, unless your name is Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, Russ did not look good in 2022. Comes back this year and looks a little bit better, but still does not look like the $245 million quarterback that Denver was expecting when they traded for him and paid him that much. So he is not he's not close to that top 5 caliber quarterback that he was once heralded as. And Seahawks fans kind of gave Broncos fans and everyone that warning, because, Denver fans and even just football fans like myself, when the Broncos made this move in the 2022 offseason, it was like, that's an incredible move for the Broncos, and it's a horrible move for the Seahawks because now they're just tanking, and they just lost their franchise guy. They lost the guy that kept them in games throughout these years, post-Legion of Boom era, and they just gave away a franchise quarterback, a future Hall of Fame quarterback, and Denver is going to take this and hit the ground running and be instant Super Bowl contenders. And Seahawks fans were listening to everyone talk about this and be like, what the hell are you guys talking about? He is not as good as y'all think he is. And then you watch, his last couple years in Seattle, and you're like, yeah, that doesn't look like a top 5 quarterback, really. And the hope was it was so bad under Nathaniel Hackett that Sean Payton comes in to get an actual adult in the building. An adult that's going to trash the last adult in the building, but an actual coach in the building that knows how to be a successful head coach, and that everything's going to be fine again. And Russ, like I said, has looked fine, but he doesn't look like the future Hall of Famer that we all thought he was. Like, he still looks uncomfortable in the system. He still doesn't look comfortable in structure, which at 35 years old, you had the question of, was he ever going to actually improve on that? At 35 years old, I don't think he ever will. And the frustrating part about it, and especially for Broncos fans, is every game you always saw the flashes of the old Russell Wilson. You always saw the flashes of the greatness. You always saw the flashes of the guy that was heralded as a future Hall of Famer. You always saw that, but it would only happen like twice a game at maximum. And then the rest of the game would just be painfully average quarterback play or bad quarterback play. So, and I think Denver just looked at it and was like, Russ is cooked. For lack of a better term, he's cooked. And he's not the guy. Sean Payton clearly doesn't want him to be the guy. And now it's time to move ahead to the future, move on, send him somewhere else. I would love to see him, assuming that the Falcons fire Arthur Smith, I would love to see him in Atlanta. I think that would be a really good spot for him where he has a bunch of elite players around him and he has a good supporting cast, much better than the one that he inherited with the Broncos. So I would love to see him in that situation. But yeah, as far as him being the future of the Denver Broncos, that ship has clearly sailed. You can't bench a guy for the last two games of the season and be like, hey, all right, come back. It's time to look ahead to 2024 for us. Nah, that's not going to happen. And also, it feels really funny and really ironic that the guy that got benched, the guy that came in to replace Russell Wilson these last two games, was one Jarrett Stidham. The same Jarrett Stidham who started the last 2 games of the regular season last year for the Vegas Raiders after they told Derek Carr to go fuck himself. So I think that's kind of funny. That's really fucking funny, actually, when you think about it. But obviously for Russ, it's just it's a bummer situation for Russ. But there's really nothing else that could be said about that because, yeah, Denver's looking to move on, whether it's to get a new veteran quarterback in free agency or just look ahead to the draft, because this is going to be a relatively deep quarterback class for the most part. So I wouldn't be shocked if that's how they're looking for next year. But yeah, the Russell Wilson error, spelled ERROR, in Denver has officially come to a close. One last thing before we get into my favorite part of the show is talking about a little bit as far as the NFL draft that's happening in late April, because all the talks throughout the season of who was going to win the Caleb Williams sweepstakes, who was going to win the race to be the worst, who was going to win the race for the number 1 overall pick. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that race has been settled. It is finished. It is over. The number 1 overall pick for the 2024 draft class belongs to, to no one's surprise, the Chicago Bears. But not with their pick. It is a pick courtesy of the Carolina Panthers, which means technically the Chicago Bears are going to have the number 1 overall pick for the second consecutive year. One, because they were the worst team in the NFL last year, and then they had the number 1 overall pick and traded that pick to the Carolina Panthers in exchange for a first-round pick in DJ Moore. And the Carolina Panthers ended up getting Bryce Young. They moved the farm to go up to get Bryce Young in a move that has really just destroyed any hope Bryce Young had in his rookie year. And the team is not very good at all. David Tepper looks like the new Dan Snyder. And Panthers fans, I feel so horrible for you. And yeah, that pick ended up being the number 1 overall pick, which once again belongs to the Chicago Bears. And everyone's like, all right, there you go. Caleb Williams, you are a Chicago Bear. But it's not like a but of anything confirmation-wise. This is a but from my personal theory perspective. This is a but that, what about Justin Fields? Because ever since Justin Fields has come back from his injury in the game at Detroit, a game that the Bears nearly won, by the way, ever since he's come back, Justin Fields has looked really fucking good. He's been lighting it up. He looks fresh. He looks energized. He's been making plays with his legs and just being a freak athlete, but he's always had that ability to. But that's happened twofold. He's made some incredible plays with his arm. Him and DJ Moore have gotten on the same page, and they've looked like a really killer combination. And Justin Fields has just been playing lights out since coming back for the Chicago Bears, to the point where this past Sunday, where they dismantled the Atlanta Falcons 37-17, Justin Fields once again lit it up to the point that Bears fans were chanting loud chants of "We want Fields." That's telling, ain't it? And that alone, at least in my eyes, this is all just my opinion here, That, at least to me, puts doubt in the idea of Chicago's going to take a quarterback and they're going to take Caleb Williams no matter what. I understand that Caleb Williams has gotten a bunch of Patrick Mahomes comps, and it's not hard to see why. You watch him play at USC, and it's if like you took prime Patrick Mahomes and placed him in college. It is insane what Caleb Williams as a football player is able to accomplish. And the Bears have been haunted since 2017 when they famously traded up one spot and gave up draft capital that became Fred Warner and Alvin Kamara and gave up those slots to move up one spot to draft Mitchell Trubisky. And then watch Patrick Mahomes go to pick 10 to the Kansas City Chiefs, and they go on to have immense success and win 2 Super Bowls, while the Bears have gotten lower and lower and lower. And Caleb Williams is seen as a guy that can seemingly rectify all that and get a Patrick Mahomes of their own finally. However, Justin Fields is not a slouch. Justin Fields can be a great quarterback, and I still believe that Justin Fields can be a franchise quarterback. I say that a hell of a lot better than most of the guys from that same 2021 draft class. I still believe that Justin Fields can be a franchise quarterback in the right situation, and that's another side of this is Justin Fields just better off going to another team and having him in a fresh start, fresh city, fresh everything, and then that's a perfect launch pad for him to light it up and turn into the franchise quarterback that I and a lot of other people know he has the capability of being. But what if Chicago is still that place for him? Because what if, with the number 1 overall pick, you keep Justin Fields, draft Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State, a guy who, even despite Caleb Williams coming out, even despite Drake May coming out, Marvin Harrison Jr. is still seen as the best player in this upcoming draft class. Draft him, and Justin Fields goes into 2024 with his top 2 receivers being Marvin Harrison Jr. and DJ Moore. I don't give a fuck who your corners is. I don't give a fuck who's in your secondary. You're not stopping both of those guys. It's not going to happen. So do you do that? Or do you just go say fuck it anyway, draft Caleb Williams, and then ship off from the Bears front office perspective? Do you draft Caleb Williams and just ship off Justin Fields to get a bunch of draft capital in return for him? Or, and this is a third option that we could just kind of throw out there, or do you keep Justin Fields and just trade the number 1 overall pick anyway to a quarterback needy team to try and get even more draft pick? Because remember the haul they got last year from the Panthers for them to go up and get Bryce Young? They can get, forget a king's ransom, they can get the fucking kingdom in exchange for the draft rights to Caleb Williams. Like, that's like a legitimate 2 first-round picks at minimum. Like, that, it would be incredible, the draft capital they can get for a team wanting to move up, whether it's in the top 5 or even outside of the top 10, that's a QB needy team, to say, fuck that, Caleb Williams is the guy. We're going to trade everything in the fucking kitchen sink to go up and get him. And the Bears benefit. But the Bears would still have to hit on those draft picks they receive. That's the big key. Now, the only thing that I don't think would happen would be like a Mike Ditka Saints situation where, you know, the famous Ricky Williams story where Ditka loved Ricky Williams so much that he literally gave up his entire draft that year in 1999 just to draft Ricky Williams. That situation's not going to happen, and honestly, I don't care if it's for Caleb Williams or not. If your GM does that, he should be fired on the spot. I don't care how good Caleb Williams is, but still though, like they can get a massive haul if they choose to just trade the number 1 overall pick entirely. But those are 3 realistic situations here for the Chicago Bears that they are now in a blessed position to deal with, because in my opinion, for the Bears, you can't really go wrong for the most part. Because in one situation, you get a generational talent at receiver and have just the best receiving tandem in the NFL off rip for Justin Fields to play with. Or you draft Caleb Williams, get a bunch of draft picks in exchange for Justin Fields, and then build around this superhuman of a quarterback that has the potential to be Mahomes 2.0. Or you trade the number 1 pick and you just get everything in the world. And now all of a sudden for the future, you're built up to in a great position to build this franchise up to be legitimate contenders in the future. If you're the Bears, you really can't lose here. It's a perfect situation for them to be in, and they have the Carolina Panthers and David Tepper to thank for this position. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all on that. But we can't just end the show on that. We can't just end the show after all that. No. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about the draft. We're talking about the playoffs. We're talking about who might referee playoff games. But instead, what we have not talked about is that there is still 1 week left in the NFL regular season. Which means there's still quite a few playoff spots and playoff positionings up for grabs. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap this episode up with our Week 18 regular season finale, final playoff scenarios. The playoffs will be set in stone after Sunday. And here are the situations that could possibly happen. Starting off with the AFC, as always, the AFC. AFC is pretty much set in stone for the most part. I mean, we got the Baltimore Ravens, who just clinched home field advantage with their dominating win over the Miami Dolphins this past weekend. But you also had the Kansas City Chiefs winning the AFC West. Once again, the Browns clinching a playoff berth with their win over the New York Jets on the final Thursday night game on the season. But with that being said, there's still some stuff up for grabs, and that being starting with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills, once again, after looking dead in the water in the middle of the season with an offense that didn't know what the fuck it was doing, all of a sudden they are now in a situation where they can not only make the playoffs this week, but have the potential to win the division because, ladies and gentlemen, the Bills and the Miami Dolphins play each other on Sunday Night Football in the last regular season game of the 2023 season. And that game is a massive game because not only is that a win and in situation for the Buffalo Bills, but the winner of that game wins the AFC East, and they will play a home playoff game in the postseason. And yeah, that's basically what the situation is for the Buffalo Bills. It's win and you're in, win and the division is yours. For the Miami Dolphins, same thing though. They already clinched a playoff spot, but it's win and win your division. But what if the Bills lose? Well, their playoff hopes are not entirely out of reach if they lose on Sunday night, because they can still make the playoffs if Pittsburgh loses, if Jacksonville loses, or if for some weird ass reason Houston and Indianapolis ends in a tie. So Buffalo still has some help to allow them to get into the playoffs, but if they wanted to win the division, It has to come down to Sunday night. But speaking of those Houston Texans, the Texans have a chance to not only clinch a playoff spot this week. If for the Texans, simple: win and you're in. Win and you're in the playoffs, which would be a massive turnaround from a team that was just picking second overall in this past year's draft to make the playoffs in the first year of CJ Stroud and DeMeco Ryans. That'd be huge for them, but they have to beat the Indianapolis Colts first in order to do it. But they can also win the AFC South because the Jaguars have been on a bit of a slide. So if Houston wins and Jacksonville loses, all of a sudden the Houston Texans are not only playing in the playoffs, they're playing a home playoff game as AFC South champions. So huge game for them. And the Indianapolis Colts, pretty much the same thing. Like, the Texans and the Colts are playing Saturday night. I believe they'll be getting the Monday Night Football crew on Saturday night. And that's a big game because that game is basically win and you're in for either team. Like I said, win and you're in for the Texans. If the Colts win, they're also in the playoffs, but they also have a chance to win the division themselves because Indianapolis needs a win and a Jacksonville loss to win the AFC South, and they will be playing a home playoff game. So, a lot of things happening in the AFC South. That game on Saturday night is a win and you're in. Winner gets into the playoffs regardless, and that team that wins on Saturday night will be playing a home playoff game if Jacksonville loses. That is the situation at hand. What about those Jaguars, though? I've been talking about the Jaguars so much. What about the Jaguars? Jaguars, it's simple. Win and you win the division. But they still haven't clinched a playoff spot yet. So what needs to happen is they're playing the Tennessee Titans. If the Jaguars end in a tie against the Titans and the Steelers lose, then they clinch a playoff berth. Ties are not that common. So the other scenario is Pittsburgh loses, Denver loses, and Houston, Indianapolis ends in a tie. So basically, Jacksonville, you need to win, is essentially what I'm saying here. Jacksonville, you need to win if you want to be in the playoffs because you can't just hope for ties. You gotta basically win and you're in. Or else Houston and Indianapolis will gladly kick you to the curb. But speaking of, this is the final AFC playoff scenario. And it's those goddamn Pittsburgh Steelers, who once again, for the, I think, 17th straight season under Mike Tomlin, have once again finished the regular season with a winning record. Unfucking believable. They are currently 9-7. Worst case scenario, they finish 9-8. It's still a winning record. This team has never experienced a losing season under Mike Tomlin, and that streak still continues. I don't fucking know how he does it, but he does, and they still have a chance to clinch the playoffs this week because they will get into the playoffs with a win over the Baltimore Ravens plus a Buffalo loss, or win over Baltimore plus a Jaguars loss, or win Houston, Indianapolis ends in a tie, or they end in a tie and then Jacksonville loses, Indianapolis, Houston ends in a tie, and then the last one also involves a Houston-Indianapolis tie, which I'm not going to read out because honestly, chances are that game's probably not going to end in a tie. Watch it fucking end in a tie now, and that clip's going to come back and bite me in the ass. But that is the situation for the AFC. Now let's move on to the NFC. The San Francisco 49ers have already clinched home field advantage, so seeding-wise, for the first round bye, that's already locked up. But there's still some things as far as seeding goes to be moved around a bit because nothing's set in stone really in the NFC outside of the Detroit Lions winning the NFC North for the first time in 30 years. And the Cowboys, Rams, and Eagles all clinching their ticket to the postseason within the past few weeks. First scenario on the board, though, the NFC South. I don't know what it is with these southern divisions, but they always seem to come out of the wire, mainly because the teams mostly suck for the most part. But come down to the wire once again We're going to start off with the Atlanta Falcons. All the Falcons need is a win over the New Orleans Saints and a Tampa Bay loss. And the Atlanta Falcons will be playing a home playoff game. Speaking of the NFC South, the New Orleans Saints, the opponent of the Atlanta Falcons in that game, they have a chance to clinch a playoff spot and win the division this week. And that, in order to clinch a playoff spot, they will need a win plus a Seahawks and Packers loss. Or end in a tie and have Seattle and Green Bay lose. So, Saints win, Seahawks, Packers lose. Saints are in the playoffs regardless. But they have a chance to win the division with a win over Atlanta, and the Buccaneers lose their games to the Carolina Panthers. But the Panthers, or not the Panthers, the Bucs rather, their path is a little more simple. Win, and you win the NFC South. Simple as that. But if you don't win, say you end in a tie to the Panthers for whatever fucking reason, they could still clinch a playoff spot if Seattle and Green Bay both lose. So that's the situation going on as far as they go. What about the Seahawks and the Packers, though? I keep fucking talking about them a lot. What about them? Let's start with the Packers first. The Packers actually have a relatively easy one. They play the Bears this weekend. For the Packers, win and you're in. It is that simple. It's that clean cut. Win and you're in. But if you don't win, then they could still clinch a playoff spot with a Vikings, Seahawks, and Bucs loss, or Vikings, Seattle, and New Orleans lose. So there's still room for them to get into the playoffs even if they don't beat the Chicago Bears. And as far as the Seattle Seahawks go, their road is a little more complicated. They clinch a playoff spot with a win plus a Green Bay loss, or if their game against the Arizona Cardinals ends in a tie, then they could still get in with a Packers and Bucs loss or a Packers and Saints loss. So that's for that. But we're not done yet because the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys, they are vying. They're both in the playoffs regardless. It doesn't matter. They're both in the playoffs. But the NFC East crown is still up for grabs. With the Cowboys, who play the Washington Commanders, theirs is a little more straightforward. Cowboys beat the Commanders, the NFC East is yours. Or, if the Eagles lose to the Giants, the NFC East crown is yours. The Eagles, who are playing the aforementioned Giants, they win and Dallas loses, then the division belongs to the Philadelphia Eagles. Which that would be, I don't know if that would be huge for them. Because honestly, whether they've been on the road or at home, they've not looked really good these past couple months anyway. So I don't know how much of an advantage it'll be. But I guess, hey, you could say you won your division again. So that'd be nice. And you put the Cowboys on the road, which they have not been all that consistent and good on this year. So still big implications for that situation to play out. But that is your Week 18 scenario. Hope you digested it properly. Hope you understood it all, because that is the situation. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to put a wrap on the show today. Like I said before, if you have not done so already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you have not done so already. Please share this video if you know anybody that enjoys this kind of content to help boost us out there in the algorithm. Also, if you'd like to support this channel financially, support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. That link will be in the description down below. That being said, I'm Double Diesel. Peace.